In our last video, we learned how to create a database. We also learned how to drop a database, then recreate it by attaching a file of a pre-existing MDF file that contained a database and its tables. In this video, we are going to learn how to create a table inside of a new database. So let's get to it. Hello everyone, and welcome back to the SQL Server Series. This video is brought to you in reference to Joe Marach's SQL Server 2016 for developers. If you're interested in purchasing a copy of this book, then please follow the link in the video description below. The create table statement can consist of multiple attributes that can affect a single column and attributes that can affect the entire table. The create table statement consists of the name of the new table followed by the names and data type of its columns. The column definitions are enclosed in parentheses, and you'll likely code one or more attributes for each column when using the create table statement. To identify whether a column can accept null values, you will code either the null or not null keyword. However, if you omit both keywords, the default value is null unless the column is also defined as the primary key. In that case, the default would not be null. The primary key keywords identify the primary key for the table. And to create a primary key based on a single column, you can code these keywords as an attribute of that column. In addition to a primary key, you can also define one or more unique keys using the unique keyword. But unlike the primary key column, a unique key column can contain null values. The not null, primary key, and unique keys are all examples of constraints. Constraints are special attributes that restrict the data that can be stored in the columns of a table. However, you will learn how to code constraints in another video. We won't cover that in this one. The identity keyword defines a column as an identity column. The default attribute specifies a default value for a column. This value is used if another value isn't specified. And the last attribute, the sparse attribute, optimizes the storage of null values for a column. This is mainly used when you know a column is going to contain a high percentage of null values. All right, so we're right back here on our create database page that we're on in the previous video. And where we left off at here was when we created the new AP database based off of a MDF file that we had stored. And so now over here in our top left hand corner in our Object Explorer, we have our new AP database. So I'm going to drop that database and we're going to start off from scratch because we're going to create some tables here. And so the first statement I'm going to run is drop database new AP. And I'm going to come up here, do a refresh in my Object Explorer. And now I'm going to create the database. I'm going to get rid of this bottom query. And then I'm going to create my new AP database. And then I'm going to get rid of this also. And then we're going to add some tables in here. So I'm going to say create table. And I'm going to call this table vendors. And then in here, actually, well, first, before we do this, let's put our syntax for the create table statement so we can see that. So the create table statement syntax is going to be the table name. So it'll be create table, table name, the name of the table you want to create. And then in parentheses, you're going to have your column name, 1, and then you're going to have your data type. Whoops. That's our data type. And then in brackets, we're going to have our column attributes. And then these can be comma separated. You can come back in and then open up another bracket. And then you can add another column name 2, data type. All right. And then column attributes, column 2 attributes, and so on. And then, whoops, I think I'll close that here. And that's your syntax. Now I'm just going to say use a new AP, our new database, and then I'm going to create table vendors, and then this table is going to have a vendor ID column, and my data type is going to be an integer. And the next column is going to have is a vendor name column, and then that's going to be a variable character data type, and it's going to be able to store a maximum of 50 characters. So I'm going to create that table, and that's going to be in our new AP database. And there's already an object named vendors in the database. Is that true? Okay, well, let's drop table vendors. It must already be in here. And then let's go ahead and let's run this query again. And now we've just recreated it. And that just created a table called vendors on our new AP database. And you see we even used the drop table quite a few times. Show some examples on that one. And so now, let's say we wanted to see those columns, vendor ID and vendor name, in the vendors table. Well, let's come over here to our new AP database. Let's go into our tables. And we see, let's refresh, we see the vendors table is here. If we expand it out and go into our columns, we see we have our vendor ID column and our vendor name column. So that's how you create a table on a new database that consists of a data type. Now this is not without column attributes. My next example is going to be with column attributes. And so I'm going to create table invoices, and then this is going to have some columns called the invoice ID integer, and this is going to be our primary key. And then the next column is going to be the vendor ID. That's going to be an integer, and then I want to add in, I want to say that you're not allowed to store any null values in this column. The next one's going to be invoice date, and I'm going to call this one small date time. That's going to be our data type. And then this one you can store null values in. And then the last one in here is going to be invoice total. That one's going to be the money data type, and this one is going to be null default 0. And then I'm going to run this query, and you see that table has been created. Now if we come over here and we refresh our vendors table and go into our, let's refresh our new AP database so we can see our new table. Now we have our invoices table, and it even capitalized it for us because we capitalized it here in our syntax. So if we go into here and see our columns, we have our invoice ID. You see that key next to it, that shows that the column attribute is a primary, which is an identity. And then if we look at our vendor ID, it's an integer, and it has not null as the column attribute. So you're not allowed to store any null values in this column. Moving down, the invoice date has a small date time data type, and you can't store null values in it. And then the last one, invoice total, is a money data type, and you are allowed to store null values in it. Now the default value is what is going to display in the column if information doesn't get passed into it. So if we were to insert into that table, let's say we inserted a new row into that table and we didn't specify an invoice total in our new row. Well, by default, it would automatically pass a 0 in. So that's what this is doing here with our default statement. So we wanted to use the sparse attribute. Well, we could come in here and then we could say we want to add a vendor address to the data type we want to use is a variable character 50. And then we're going to say sparse null. And then that's going to add in a sparse null attribute. It looks like I need this comma here to fix that. And so you would have to, let's go ahead and let's just drop that table again. Let's drop table invoices. And then let's create it again with that sparse null attribute. Let's do that. And then now that we have that, we can come over here and we can refresh again. And we can see the vendor address 2 is a sparse of a variable character 50 that can store null values. So that is all for this video. In our next video, we're going to learn how to create indexes inside of our databases. So if you're interested in watching the next one, head on over to database-tutorials.com, and until next time.